Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. My guest this week is the fantastic Andrew Armas. Now, I've known Andrew for years, but if you're hearing him for the first time today, you'll start to realise why I think so highly of him. There's a sort of raw honesty about Andrew in everything that he says and does. It just kind of shines through. Many entrepreneurs are, wrongly in my view, stereotyped by a sort of act now, think later mentality. But Andrew's quite different. He did a lot of his thinking before he ever started to spin that entrepreneurial wheel of fortune. And you'll hear in this interview, laid bare, the sometimes painful thought processes that led him, and I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast will relate to them, to take the personal as well as the business decisions that he made. And later on in the interview, you'll hear him reflecting on not only his successes, but his many learnings along the way. It's all gold dust in my opinion. But let's go back to Andrew's early days. Even then, he felt a big difference from the tramlines of other people's expectations and what he personally felt about his life.
What informed, my early life was, I suppose, a kind of sense of, what is it that I'm going to do with the rest of my life, right? Through schooling, I was very conscious of this, I've got to get the grades, I've got to, keep moving, I've got to keep moving up. My parents were very much about, and education is really, really critical for you, in terms of choice in your life going forward. So I felt very much a pressure to kind of succeed, although I was rather, I'm going to say, a bit lackadaisical in terms of my, desire to kind of study for exams. So I was a little bit of a crammer when it came to exams. And I'm going to say just about managed to, wend my way into university. But through that time, I'm going to say what was really curious to me before I went to university was looking around, talking to my parents, talking to my friends' parents, and we weren't particularly well off. So we came from a particular, class in society. I wouldn't say we were middle class. In the old kind of terminology, you might have said we were kind of upper working class. Mum had a couple of jobs. Dad had a job, and I went to kind of support Dad in his job. And I always remember conversations with him, which he would always say to me, son, whatever you do in life, make sure you love what you do, right? And the reason why this kind of, I was kind of curious and looking around is I really got this sense of, I was conscious that a lot of people were going to work and they were working for what we might call the weekend or for the holidays. And I had this fascination with, wow, you spend a lot of time working. Why would you be that miserable? That all of it was about in service of some point in the future where you felt like you could let go of what you did in the main part of your life in order to enjoy the experience in the moment, right? Which was a holiday or the weekends or the evenings or whatever it might have been. And I kind of had a fascination then of why people choose to do whatever they do. And so when I just went to university, I had been kind of following this path and I was good at certain things, but they might have been more kind of scientific in terms of approach. And when I got to university, I'd applied to do archaeology and I can't remember what it was. And I went to the universities and I saw them and I was really kind of like, what am I doing? What is this all about? I didn't really like the university I was going to. I wasn't really that curious about the course. I've got a fascination for history and geography and that sort of stuff. And I was kind of like, well, no, this isn't going to work for me. I'm going to take a year out. So I went a year out to try and find out what it is I really wanted to study. Right. And in that process, I was really looking at what is it that I wanted to do with my life. That was the kind of curiosity. And so I was like, well, if I'm not really sure about who I am and how I'm making decisions, and I look around, a lot of people are also, seem to be making decisions that are making them unhappy for a lot of their life. I need to study human behavior. So I decided to do psychology at university, just out of that curiosity, like, Andrew, make a great decision for the rest of your life. How are you going to make this great decision? And then when I got to university, I realized psychology, a lot of it, and a lot of psychology students will also confess to this and believe this to be true, is like there's a lot of science in it, right? And it's not about the human behavior. You've got to do the statistics, you've got to do the maths, you've got to do the research, and it wasn't that particularly enjoyable until we got to really choosing the sorts of modules that we could kind of take. And then I got really into cognitive, psychology and why the psyche and the subconscious and why we choose to do things. And that's when I realized, wow, okay, I started to see intellectually what was going on in the world. I could start to say, oh, why, fear, anxiety, grasping, neediness. Oh, that was driving a lot of the choices for people, right? And I was like, wow, okay, I can carry on, and I could start to look at my life intellectually and go, oh, see how that had kind of created what I was creating. And then fast forward now a few more years, I've gone into human resources after doing a master's in psychology. I'd felt like, oh, I'm really getting into, and I was particularly in talent acquisition and recruitment. And it was like, yeah, I want to make sure people are choosing their jobs because they're really passionate about it, right? I was going to go in and change recruitment entirely because it was like, you've got line managers wanting technical skills. You've got people coming into the process that have been choosing what they were good at rather than what they loved doing. So it was a marriage made in hell, right? And I was going to change all of that. And then fast forward, I found myself in exactly that same situation. I was successful in HR, but I'd kind of taken the practice of grasping and getting better and better to climb this HR ladder. And then I was left going, well, now here I've got lots of anxiety and fear, and that I've got to help more. I literally found, and I inherited the legacy behaviors from my parents and from their generation and the war generation. I was like, here I was again. I was like, and that manifested, sorry, I'm talking a lot, that manifested in all sorts of aspects of my life, this kind of anxiety, fear. And then I realized, wow, okay, it's making me unhappy on many different aspects. And I need to do something.
Was there a kind of particular moment where you thought, actually, I've now sort of fallen into that practice, when your dad had said, make sure you love what you do, and then suddenly you're thinking, hell, I don't. And I mean, was there a particular moment, or was it just a slow realization?
No, there was a particular moment. I mean, there was obviously a growing sense of, wow, I'm heading towards a midlife crisis. So my late 20s, and this is where it becomes much more human, and some people find this difficult to kind of hear, but I was looking at all of my relationships, and I was married at the time. I was about to become a father, and I had this growing, when my son was born, I just had this epiphany in that moment, which was like, if I carry on doing this, if I carry on living this lie of what I really truly believe I should be doing in my life, being free perhaps of the fears and anxieties and the kind of inherited neurosis, right? If I carry on doing that, my son is going to inherit that as well. And so there literally was, in the delivery room, as I was holding him in my hands, was like, what does my son deserve? And strangely, the moment was, well, he deserves to be free to choose and to not fall into all of these traps. And actually, in order to give that, but also in order to meet that, he deserves a father that can also live without those fears and anxieties. And so that was the moment to go, wow, okay, he deserves this, I deserve that. I have to be the change in order for the change to be for him as well. And in that moment, I could see the whole of his, kind of informative years ahead of me, because it meant readdressing all of the relationships I had in my life and saying, the person you think I am is actually not who I am. That is a manifestation of all of these neuroses and fears and what have you. And this is what it looks like. This is the identity that I've created. And I am not that identity. I am something different. And that means letting go of, it means completely, the view of where you thought my life was going, parents, wife, brothers, sisters, best friends, the whole lot was like, I'm giving all of that up. It's like, I am going to take time out to learn who I am, what I am deeply passionate about, and how I'm going to deliver that. And it cost me, I'm going to say, my life. It cost me the relationship with my loved ones, my closest friend, because I was challenging, essentially, all I can talk about is myself. I was saying, I have been essentially lying to you about who I am. And I think it challenged people at a number of levels, right? It challenges their own concepts of their identity and who they are. It challenged their kind of, well, I haven't been doing that, Andrew, and now you're saying this. So yeah, I'm not interested in who you are. You're a very different person. And so there was no judgment about how they treated me, but I could see all of this in that waiting room, right, in that delivery room, and the cost that it was going to have about, the irony being the freedom of my son to not inherit my neurosis was, wow, okay, I may spend less time with him because I end up in a divorce, right? And the divorce laws, and I could see all of this. It was like right there in distinct clarity. And the reason why that then, gave me full confidence is like suddenly everything I'd intellectually understood and been aware of, I had a visceral embodied experience. And that was a very different awareness of then understanding why things are in the world. Right. It was literally the light went on and I was suddenly like, wow, I just certainly had a much clearer vision of, that is why somebody is. And this is why I am like this. This is why systems are like that as well. And that's incredibly powerful and liberating and freed me, to then go, don't add to the problem. Do something that's going to help.
Thank you for that, sharing that answer, which is a very wonderful example of that moment in your life where things were changing. I suppose my sort of shallow question to follow up is, what did you then do?
Yeah, so as I kind of alluded to, it was I went in and handed my notice in. So yeah, this isn't who I am. So I spoke to my wife and I said, who you had fallen in love with is not who I am. Right? This is who I am. If you want to stay in relationship with that, that's fantastic. But I don't expect you to. Right? So I'm not holding you to any sort of promise or commitment that you made based on a different human being sitting on the other side. I am different, and that takes some getting used to. So what I did was I literally was I decided I was only going to do the things that were really speaking to this is helpful to the world. This is, what are my talents? What am I deeply passionate about? What do I love? And there was a process of finding guides that talking to people that I knew were experts in this particular field that were going to help me through this transitionary period. It wasn't like a kind of, I've got all the answers now. It's like, God, I've got no answers, right? It's like, at least I can sit now. I need some help. And so I went and I was lucky enough, because I had been in HR, that I had come across amazing personal development people, like literally at the extremes of personal development and leadership development, that I was able to lean into and go, help, right? And a huge vulnerability for me is asking for help, right? I've never done it in my life. It was like, that was one of the identities that I built. It's like I was this island that could make everything happen, and everybody, don't worry, I'll take care of it. It's like suddenly I was like, God, I don't know the answer, help me, right? And so I managed to pull around me essentially 3 or 4 people that were willing to sit with me, in my vulnerability, in the heat of that moment, in the cost to my life, and bring their full self to it as well. Not to feel any. I felt unjudged by that group around, and I had to bring them around me on a regular basis. I would say it was about a year of constantly meeting, constantly being supported, guided, talking about this process of, let's call it liberation, or finding inner peace, equanimity, how to make decisions going forward in my life that were much more consequential. They'd be much more sustainable for my life, rather than just a distraction from discomfort. Oh God, I'll make another decision because actually that'll make me feel better in the moment. No, these decisions need to serve me for the rest of my life.
And in terms of how that manifested itself in your sort of professional career, then, I knew you before, when I was editing magazines and so on, but then there were entrepreneurial, well, we can call them entrepreneurial, we can call them what we want, really, things that you did with Common Purpose and the Spring Project. I mean, maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about that and how that started your sort of entrepreneurial side of your journey.
Yeah, great. So what I was able to then, I'm making sustainable decisions for me. I was able to look at what was being created in the personal development space and was on offer, right, in terms of leadership development, personal development, coaching, essentially. And looking at my talents was, I really feel like I've got I've had this intellectual journey that I had all of this knowledge, right? And now I had this kind of visceral experience that had really given me some degree of wisdom. And then I had all of these wonderful guides that were helping me to interpret it and be able to have a lexicon around it and talk about it in a much more powerful way that was kind of, joining the heart and mind and the neuroscience of it and the psychology of it. So I had all of these wonderful resources that had come together, and I was like, right, I'm going to create something that's going to be of service to others. That means they don't have to have the car crash, right? They don't have to have the midlife crisis. Can I design something with other people, right, that would help people to journey through what I started to talk about, my abyss, right, or my road to Damascus moment? It's like, does everybody have to kind of completely deconstruct themselves, or can they go on a journey? So this is my entrepreneurial thought, was the world needs this. It's always needed it, as far as I can tell, right back to the Industrial Revolution. It's like, through the wars, through all of the kind of discrimination, through all of the generational trauma and all that sort of, it's like, the world deeply needs, the opportunity to go on this journey that I'm talking about. It's not like I've got to make them get it, but it's like there's no resource at the moment, or is limited, or I didn't even know about it. So it's like, the entrepreneur within me was, can we design something that would be in service of people, so that they could get this wisdom, get this clarity, get this knowledge about sustainable decisions for themselves without having to go through the train crash. And so I joined Common Purpose, which, a beautiful gift as well, is because they work with multiple organizations, and what they were doing is they were giving embodied experiences to people of, oh my goodness, this is what other people are experiencing. Put me down in situations. Let me draw on the resources that I haven't had to use up until now in my work and my life. It's like, let me really look at what resources I have within me by which to respond to what is being asked of me in this moment. So Common Purpose is a beautiful model of basically throwing people into their vulnerabilities and letting them learn and grow about, what they understand about themselves, which then brings such empathy for others. I mean, it's a beautiful thing is when you start to understand empathy for yourself and how you've been disconnected, you suddenly start to have much more care and empathy for other people in their situations. Why you start to see why things they are as they are, and that brings a great compassion and empathy. And then the Spring Project, which you talk about, that was a much more particular response to, at the time, the financial crisis. Everybody was talking about this generation of young people that were being left behind. I don't know whether you can remember back in 2007, 2008, the banking crisis. And it was like, oh, there were 1 million graduates that were unemployed. And so we decided what we would create is like, there's a group of people that cannot access or afford the sorts of training that we're offering them. How do we get them to engage in their lives in a very system? And it was also a need coming the other way. People were going, I want to live with purpose. I want to live with meaning. I want my values to mean something. There's a whole people talk about Generation Z now as being more value driven. I mean, it's always been there, but at that particular time, there was something, the adversity of it, that was allowing people to really step in and go, I want meaning and purpose. And so we were responding to that as well, to help people basically get clear about where their energy was going to come from, to really see what's going on in their mind, to make whole person decisions that were going to serve them for the rest of their life. And that's what the Spring Project did. It served thousands of people to basically journey this without having to go through the trauma, right?
Now,
and yeah,
no, I was going to say, so what you're talking about, I mean, everybody sort of talks about purpose now, in business, things like that. In a way, when I heard you first talking about this, there weren't that many people talking about it. And so would you say you were kind of almost like ahead of your time in that respect? That's the first question. And the second question is, did you see yourself as an entrepreneur in any way, or some variation of an entrepreneur? Because at that point you were sort of, to all intents and purposes, self-employed, and you were setting up and running this thing, and you'd come outside the corporate womb, if you like, and you were doing these things. So there's two questions really. Is that, did you feel you were ploughing a lonely furrow, if you like, at that point around purpose? And the second was, how were you seeing yourself? Were you seeing yourself in an entrepreneurial guise or not?
I might take them in reverse, actually, a little bit. Yeah. So was I feeling entrepreneurial? Yeah. I mean, it was a small team. There was obviously the individual journey that I was going on felt very distinct from what most people were doing. So I felt kind of entrepreneurial just in how I chose to do work, right? So that, and I to a certain extent, there's still quite an entrepreneurial feel to how I live my life, a little bit, right? It's so I don't, but whether I could kind of go, in a work context, did it feel entrepreneurial? I don't think it really crossed my mind. It was just literally I'd gone deep into the passions and the energy that I've got. I was listening to how those could maybe meet a need in the world, and I was trying to marry the two up, right? So I suppose that's entrepreneurial, right? And I hadn't gone, I'm being really entrepreneurial here, but I was going through those processes that I now look in my entrepreneurial state with MI and how I'm working now, is to go, yes, that's what entrepreneurs do. So not all entrepreneurs, I guess, are purposeful, but there always seems like some sort of passionate, purposeful drive. So this answers the second part of the question is, there always feels like, and purpose can come from, again, because I've studied it and and I'm deeply kind of curious about purpose and meaning in the workplace. Some people perhaps misinterpret their own inner needs as purpose, right? So they might be angry or frustrated at something in their own life, and instead of perhaps looking towards the sources of why that's occurring and what can come from discovering and uncovering that anger and that frustration. And the reason why I mention this, because it's quite important for me, is if you create from anger and frustration, right, often a lot of what gets created is unsustainable, right? And we've seen that with the work that we do, is when people come from that place of, rather than a place of, oh, what's really in service of both me and what the world really needs, that is a much more unconditional, a much more healthy place by which to create from. And entrepreneurs that can find that within themselves and go, I don't need the world to get there. It's literally like, this is what I'm going to do. How does the world engage with this? Like, that's almost like the harder piece. It's like, I know what I need to do. How do I get the world to understand they need it also? Right. And that is perhaps the even more fundamental challenge than just the abyss, right? It's like, oh, okay. And that's when I think the most successful entrepreneurs is where they found that this is my calling. It's a healthy calling. It's about a sustainable, caring, unconditional loving for myself, let's say. And I can put that and bring that into the world that is also unneedy. And the need of the world will then respond to it, and I will grow from that particular space.
Okay,
so it's
great.
an absolutely critical thing. I think we need more meaning and purpose. And I do encourage people, it's called MI, the organization, because we talk about a sacred mountain, but the inner mountain of understanding our deepest motivations, understanding where we can find meaning and what our purpose might be, is a critical tool to then unlocking all of our brilliance and our talents.
Brilliant answer as well. So I mean, I'm interested in this because a lot of one of the reasons why I set up this podcast was around a frustration with the way entrepreneurs were characterized. You know, I see many different types of entrepreneurs, and yet on TV you only see the Alan Sugar type entrepreneur, which to me is like way back when in those terms. Tell us then a bit about the evolution from the Spring project then, and take us on that little journey that leads to your current business and your current calling, if you like.
Yeah, great. The Spring project lasted 5 years or so, and it kind of run its course. You know, that kind of the response to that generational kind of need, and giving people employability skills that were going to serve them right for the rest of their lives. It kind of run its course, and then I was curious about now that I'd worked in large corporate right in my early career. I'd now come out and done, I'm going to say, really my apprenticeship. My internship really in personal development, leadership development, was in that personal stuff, as well as then applying it to other people as well. I then felt, actually, now what, I've got credibility, right? So before, when I was doing quite successfully in the workplace, I was like, God, that's really, I don't know whether it was saboteur syndrome or whatever, right? My thinking trap at the time, but I was successful, I think, because people were going, yeah, you know what, meaning and purpose is quite important in the workplace as well. But anyway, I felt much more equipped to then go, can I apply what I've learned back into the corporate world? If there is something that I recognize, yeah, it's like, if you can create organizations, cultures, right, groups of people that are coming from this particular place, wow, imagine what they can deliver into the world, right? That's how most successful organizations start anyway, right? But it's like, could I go back into an already established organization to see whether that's possible? So I went back into pharmaceutical HR. And I literally went in very low key. It was literally like, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to be talent acquisition. I'm going to come in and just start putting bums on seats, right, for an organization. But what I'll do is maybe I'll change the process a little bit, right? I'll make it more about, you know, does doing this job meet your personal, you know, purpose in life, right? Convince me of that, and I'll give you the job, right? So I just went back and I started to really apply my apprenticeship, my learning into that. And suddenly I started to get traction, right? It was like literally people were like, I'm like, this is different. This is like amazing, right? And so that, and then very quickly I managed to progress within the organization, right, to a more, let's say, senior role within the organization. I come in under the radar totally, and then I managed to progress, and then I was in charge, right? It was like, okay, apply this knowledge to everybody that walks through the door, every promotion that we get. How does it then integrate into our other people's systems? So it's like, now's the challenge. And I said to myself, right, the outcome for me, because it's all very well talking about it philosophically and going, yeah, this is great, and everybody, you know, they love their job. It's like, what would the outcome be for me? And, you know, I remember sitting down with a team that was around, you know, that I built, which was lovely, and some that were there already, and it was like, beautiful. Okay, what's the outcome that would really tell us that this technology, and I call technology kind of like this understanding, applying it in the workplace, you know, it was a success. And it was like, well, there would be performance in the organization, you know, our bottom line would increase, our turnover would go down, right? Our absenteeism would go down. But actually what people said is, people would say this is the best company in the country to work for. That's what they'd say, because they'd absolutely love coming to work, working with the people that they're working with the line managers that they've got and the work that they're doing. So it's like, right, okay, how do we measure that? Well, there are awards that you can win that say you are the best, that are, impartial. They're voted on by all your employees. You can't influence them, right? So it's like, right, those are the awards we're going to win, and we're going to give ourselves 5 years to do it. And all of those other metrics we will also measure along the way. And we believe they will be an out. But really, the outcome was the culture. It was like, do people literally love what they're doing? And within 5 years, we'd made Roche the best company to work for in the UK by those measures. With a performance that was really strong financially. That hadn't been a consequence. Even a downward dip in terms of like. So and it took a multi-systemic application of this knowledge, right? It's like, okay, we've got egos at the top of the organization. How do we overcome the resistance that they've succeeded and got to those positions based on an old model of thinking, right? So why would they have any interest in promoting people based on a different level of consciousness than their own, right? So how do we we had to think very systemically about all the levers that we could pull without it being guerrilla. This isn't about cloak and dagger stuff. This literally is about using the right data, the right evidence to convince, playing to the mind when you need to. You're really meeting the needs of the ego in that particular moment while not compromising the longer term sustainable choices that you're making. So, to give you an example, what does that really mean? So to give you an example is, as we recruit, it's like, if we want more of the top of the organization to have a higher level of consciousness, prime the pump. It's like the people that we bring in, if there's more consciousness there, then more likely it's to trickle to the top in the long run, right? So that's just one very short kind of thought about it. So that was Roche. And then Roche had a big restructure. HR had a restructure. I was in a global role. I was then out of position. I'd kind of moved myself back out of position, and they were asking me to do something that wasn't playing to my passion. And I was like, okay, rather than, there will be somebody that will love this job, if I'm going to stick by my principles, give it to somebody that will love it, and I will leave and get out of the way. And I was like, I've now also, I suppose, at some level within myself, proven that this works in a very complex, large corporate environment. How do you architect a culture? And I was like, now I've learned. Now I've got it.
So in a sense, there was a sort of job done in that you thought, can I apply these principles internally? And you had. Was there another bit of you though that was itching to have another crack at self-employment in any case?
I think so. The fact that I found, I mean, I was fearless anyway, because of all the choices that I'd made. I was paid well. I could have easily fallen into Andrew. What do you do? My wife, my wife now, she could have gone, what are you talking? You want to go and be an entrepreneur? You want to go and deliver this to more organizations? You want to support more people? It's like, you're bonkers. You're doing a really great job at Roche. You're having a great time. It's like, no, I'm out of position. So I was kind of, I was like, there are more people that need this, right? It's not that I need them to get it. It's I need to provide the opportunity that more organizations, more people that are working in these organizations might go, yeah, we can love this too. There is a way by which to look at business and go, none of these traditional metrics need to suffer, but the culture can still be improved. And that's what's so amazing about it. To come back to your point is 20 years ago when I was talking about this, right? There were one or two people were talking about it, and the Simon Sinek's were just kind of getting into the groove on it and that sort of stuff. Brené Brown, who's that, right? You've got to wait 10 years before that happens, right? So 20 years ago when we were talking about it, it's like, no, and this is what's so bizarre about it and why I don't get it with business, but which is fruitful ground for entrepreneurs, is the science now tells you this is the way to do business. The science tells you, right? The neuroscience, the outcomes, the real world evidence and data, all the companies that are benefiting from this particular approach, right? Big companies, little companies, and yet the majority of them resist it. It's literally business is denying the evidence now and the science now. And that's what I find so entrepreneurial about it. It's like, wow, okay, this is a massive opportunity as well. Not just simply the world will be a better place. This is a new way to do business. It's like, wow, there's think about all the jobs, all of the roles, all of the new things that will get created, the abundance that will get created by the majority of business actually turning towards this and going, okay, we're burning people out, we've got higher turnover, absenteeism, mental health issues, yada yada yada. There needs to be a different way. Now we're ready to look at the science. Okay, now come and work with us, and that's really exciting. Yeah.
So, and in terms of the timing of you doing this, obviously there's this restructure going on at Roche and so on. But Was there a kind of a right moment in time as well because of what post-pandemic, sort of environments, working environments have changed, and so perhaps people were starting to think in this kind of, as we're getting towards the end of the pandemic, that perhaps that audience is more receptive to the sorts of things you are wanting to say.
Yeah, that's where my entrepreneurial nose, and when I was talking to my wife to say I'm about to make this choice, it was like, look, we're going to be on the right side of history for this. It's like things coming down the line, right? You're just feeling them now, right? I'm feeling them deeply from 25 years ago, but I've been through a number of cycles of it, and it's like it's amazing when change comes along. People really cling on with their fingers, right? Even through the banking crisis, it's like we got there again, right? Another cycle of it. So, but I was like, what you're feeling now is imagine this, right? Worse, right? And all of the metrics by which you measure this they're all going in the wrong direction, right? So at the time, I could kind of, I had that entrepreneurial, I can smell something big coming down the line. Now, Andrew, again, you want to challenge yourself, Andrew. You want to be of use, meet that need, and get in at a time, keep learning, grow through this time as well. If you can make it work at a time when mental health, it's like, what a great sign as well. It's like, if you can make this work, also it's a great challenge, in that particular time. So yes, it was a little bit of, if not now, when, right?
Okay. So now we're kind of moving towards the present now, and in terms of, you had a spell working as an entrepreneur in one sense, then going back in house, applying a lot of those principles, and then back out again. I mean, have you ever sort of reflected on, perhaps as an entrepreneur, what your biggest virtue is and what your biggest fault is? Do you have triggers where you recognize your faults or ways or things that you, as an entrepreneur, everybody has their faults, but are there things that you spot yourself, oh, here I go again, Andrew, this is the thing that I need to get on top with if I'm going to make this business or that venture successful?
Obviously, there are a number of us in the organization, but there's one other founding partner, and I literally just came off a call with him a little earlier to this particular call, and to help help anybody realize that if you're expecting anybody to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself, is like, that's a big issue, right? So we are constantly working on our own inner mountain, and so it's a beautiful question to ask me, because we were very much looking at my, let's say, triggers or frailties or perhaps blind spots, and also how these could also benefit from an entrepreneurial perspective, right? Are there some generalities with entrepreneurs? So the first one I would talk about is asking for help, right? It's like I've been inherited this practice where I've always been able to drive success in a very individual way. I've built great teams. They've all, they have come a little bit towards me. They love working. I build good cultures within teams as well as within organizations, but I haven't really lent on the team to go, you know what, this is my vulnerability. So I've always felt a little bit kind of like, I've got to still be, because I can see this and I can feel it, is have no expectation on their ability to help me, right? It's I've got to, so definitely I find it hard to ask for help when I should ask for help. And I would encourage any entrepreneur to go, yeah, you know what, that might be a practice that I've got. It's like, I must have all the answers. I shouldn't, I should be able to know what to do. And we are talking about not only within our organization supporting each other through these particular blind spots, but it's also getting external. We're actually talking about perhaps a group of elders, or that you might go non-executive directors, that would also be able to kind of point out and go, yeah, Andrew, this might be your time, Andrew, to ask for help. I mean, my partner Matthew's brilliant at it. He's absolutely nailed me on it this morning. So asking for help would be one. The second one is, I'm perhaps a little bit over unconditional, right? It's like, my intention is very much about sustainability, care, non-judgment in the world. And what can happen is I can fall into a little bit of unhelpful humility in that space. I know it probably doesn't sound like that on this call, but maybe I'm actually trying to practice something different. But those sorts of people that are very generous, that are very grateful for things in the world, that can really see why things are as they are, there can be an unhelpful humility in it. And so sometimes I can basically, let's say, compromise myself or diminish myself with the view that, actually, it's giving and I'm helping other people. And so again, from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's really to look after your well-being, right? To really be going, I need to get paid for this. I need to have the time and space by which to reflect, whatever need, meets your need from a well-being perspective. really look at those closely, and don't ever feel guilty about the time that it might require to take care of yourself in that particular. It's what what at MI we're obviously encouraging in many other organizations, and why cultures become more healthy is to have that relationship with time and that relationship with ourselves, which then creates abundance way more than the kind of incremental growth that we've been all kind of convinced of for the last 200 years. So those would be my two things that I would say, hopefully from an entrepreneurial perspective. Ask for help, take care of yourself, and they are blind spots.
Great, that's a fantastic answer. Now, we want to give our listeners the confidence they need to succeed. If there was one thing, you've sort of alluded to them, in your previous answer, but if you just sat down, you could only say like one sentence or one short para to somebody who was just literally just starting out about a piece of sage advice, if you like, what would that be?
It would be, work out why you do what you do, because that will take you on a journey of such deep discovery about yourself and possibly where you're holding yourself back, right? And that would be it. And so it seems like a very innocuous question, but the journey towards deep understanding of that unlocks such huge resilience, abundance, actually our deepest talents, passion, energy, and purpose at the end of it. So yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and just from my own point of view, I think the moment when I worked out why I do what I do, that actually sort of liberated me personally. So I totally subscribe to that.
Have you done this podcast in return? Have you shared your? I don't think I've seen that one, Trevor. Maybe we need to reverse roles.
Well, yeah, I'll be happy. I mean, I have done interviews with people where they've been quizzing me on that, but yeah, so no, I'm quite happy to go into the into the chair myself, and field the answers. Maybe we'll do a reverse. I'll do an away fixture in your podcast in future. Final question from me is, so tell me a little bit about, with sort of MI, your business at the moment, we obviously get what you're trying to achieve with that, but is there anything in particular that you're up to with that business at the moment that you want to talk about, or that you're particularly excited about? What's the next frontier for you in your current business?
Yeah, beautifully put, frontier. Yeah. So we talk about the MI way, right? And we are all about honing our skills to help, because what you meet on this personal journey to, let's say, at least a degree of liberation from our fears and our traumas and our experiences, being able to see things why they really are like that in your life, you are going to meet certain things, right? And the thing that I'm particularly proud of, excited about MI, is personally that we're all on that journey as well, right? So we aren't looking to talk about a process or a philosophy that actually we have no experience of, and there are a lot of people in the leadership development space, a lot of large consultancy organizations with people that are pronouncing that they are these masters and these experts, and they've never done any of the work themselves. And that's what I'm particularly proud of and excited about, is the quality of how we meet people, help them understand their journey they're going to go on. We call it the MI way, and that is our ability to hold them and in their vulnerabilities in a non-judgmental way by being able to see how we're turning up. That's what I'm particularly excited about, and how that manifests is not only in the wonderful clients that we have that we're working with, but we're also thinking about a charter for business as a whole, which is really going to, we call this love is good for business, right? And this isn't love, familial love or romantic love, or, in need of somebody's kind of anger or frustration. This is about unconditionality. This is about self-regard. This is about, consciousness in the workplace. And we're thinking about a movement or a charter that organizations can kind of sign up to in aspiration to really put at the center this individual deep understanding, right? And built around kind of like this personal development program. So it still has a lexicon and a talk and a way of communicating to organizations that might not have reached that higher level of consciousness, let's say, about how they get the best out of people. But it's done in a way that can act as a bridge, can act as a provocation, but it's also something you can aspire to. And it's kind of simple steps that once you commit to them, you start to go on that journey, the inner mountain, as we call it. We start to go on. And so love is good for businesses. I'm particularly excited about as well, because it kind of maybe talks more broadly to the systemic need as well, and what people are kind of wishing in the world, and how they want to be treated, and how we want to build trust in the world, and how business can play a part in rebuilding some of those things that seem to have been lost in our busyness and our doing and our, one-upmanship and our competition and our survival and our fear. It's a response to that in a kind and gentle but expansive and open way. And that's what I'm excited about.
Well, that's all mind-blowing stuff. Andrew's a sort of one-man whirlwind, an energetic bundle of honesty who just tells it as it is. Today, he loves doing what he does, as his dad had urged him way back when, and was amazingly frank about his need to ask for help more often. And near the end of that interview, how humility is not always a good thing. There's so much else besides, but I just don't have time to mention it all. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merri Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.